Mental Crack Podcast contains information that may not be suitable for all listeners and is not recommended for everyone. Its topics are sometimes graphic and always a little bit edgy. So, unless you like getting calls from your school's counselors about Krampus like we do, you may want to send your kids off to go do something else for a little bit. But for now, go ahead and grab a drink and settle in. It's time for Mental Crack.
Kedmila Falce, 100,000 welcomes to you. Thank you for joining us for the first time or coming back to join us on Mental Crack. We discuss killers, cults, and crimes, always with a proper drink on the side, and the psychology behind the madness. Before we even get to the business of our topic, we have an important announcement to make. We have our first official patrons. A very special thanks to Robert Peake Jr., We've known Robert for over 25 years, and he's always been one of the most positive people in our life. Rob, thank you so much from the bottom of our collective heart. We love you so much. And the generosity just keeps coming in. Our second official patron is Fiona Cameron. This beautiful patron is sending her support all the way from Australia. She is a trivia master, especially Parks and Rec and The Good Place. And our kiddo happens to idolize the heck out of her, and rightfully so. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Fee, you are the best. Thank you so much. We love you.
If you would like to support Mental Crack just like Rob and Fee, you may do so by visiting patreon.com/mentalcrack, MENTALCRAIC. All patrons receive an on-the-air shout-out, and as the podcast grows, so will the benefits. Also, we had the privilege of appearing on Last of the Real podcast 10th episode. These gentlemen originate from Jamaica, and their podcast covers a range of topics, some quite controversial. Episode 10 covered the topics of paternity fraud in Jamaica, jacket culture, and DNA testing. They welcome productive discussion and guest panelists on hot topics. You can find them on YouTube, and we will share the link to their channel on our Patreon page. We hope to feature them on an upcoming episode of Mental Crack soon. Thank you guys for a fun time last week and for tipping back some red stripe with us, even if I did not tip back at a pace that was comfortable for everyone else. In fact, it was too slow. I was sandbagging. I had stuff to do the next day, and I had to get up early, so I was not a drinking person that night.
Sometimes being responsible means sandbagging.
Unfortunately so.
But we really did have a good time talking to Jermaine and everybody.
We did.
Yep. Gosh, we talked about everything. And if you do have the opportunity to check out the interview, now they did on episode 10, there was so much going on between the interview and that topic of DNA testing and paternity fraud that they had to divide that particular episode up into multiple pieces, and we've done that before, but unknowingly at the outset. But they have done that, so there's multiple parts and pieces. Definitely check it out, listen to them. They always find good people to come and share about the topics and put some opinions out there, and it's really well researched. And these guys have something good going. And
again, the link will be on our Patreon page, but it's Last of the Real Podcast, DI, yeah. Last of the Real Podcast.
Thanks again, guys.
Yep. And I guess with that, talking about red stripes and such, right. What's on tap for tonight, Jen?
All right. So speaking of beverages of the adult variety, as you know, when we're preparing for a podcast, we work to pair whiskey and beer with our chosen topic. But let's just say I'm not a fan of Italian beer. I'm sorry. I know they try. It's just not my bag. And so we're covering another female serial killer today, and she's from Italy. So I got domestic, and I would like everybody to hold their side comments, please. So instead of beer today, we are having sangria. And the recipe I used comes from Delish.com, and I'm going to be posting that link on the Patreon page as well.
With that, we will go into a brief history of sangria. So, early Greeks and Romans mixed their wine with sugar, spices, and whatever was available, and it was called hippocras. Sometimes it was heated like mulled wine. Hippocras was widely consumed as water was, unsafe to drink due to high bacteria content. A bit of alcohol made the water safer to drink, though not entirely safe. People who lived in modern-day Spain were doing something similar with grapevines planted by the Phoenicians around 1100 BC. and then with vines planted by the Romans afterwards. However, in the 700s, the Spanish wine business and, by extension, the Spanish sangria business slumped during the occupation of the Islamic Moors. Sangria made its return once the Moors' rule ended in 1492. And with the return of wine, there was, well, obviously, the return of sangria.
Olé.
Indeed. Sangria, which means blood in Spanish, which is fitting for the episode, in reference to the red wine used, has been traditionally made with Spanish Tempranillo and other wine from the Rioja with added citrus fruit, but even then, no sangria is made the same. Sangria became stylish in the U.S. during the 1964 World's Fair in New York City. Spain's sponsored pavilion featured the drink, and Americans have been thirsty for sangria ever since. In fact, Jen, I talked to a good friend of ours the other night, and I bid you hello for him. Shout out to Kevin there.
What's up, Kevin?
He actually makes a peach-based sangria.
Kevin, and you've always been my hero, but that just bumped you up a few.
But during the discussion where I was telling him you were making sangria, he then decided to try to find some peaches, which this may not be the best time of year to do that. Anyhow, back to the topic at hand.
Anybody could find peaches this time of year, it's Kevin.
It's true. He is industrious.
Yes.
Today, under European law, all sangria must be made in Spain or Portugal and have less than 12% alcohol by volume. So by law, it has to be made in Spain or Portugal. Oddly enough, much like champagne in France or other things like bourbon, it's a regional thing.
And whiskey.
Yep. Only Irish.
Exactly.
Whiskey. Not all whiskeys.
Best kind. I hear.
That's what some say. The best sangria, however, is homemade, like what we have today. Here's hoping it's tasty.
And Andy, would you mind pouring us a couple glasses of sangria while I talk about our snackies?
Certainly.
Thank you so much.
I like calling them attackies.
Snackies, because, yes, they... asshole. That was not okay. All right. So we do have some homemade snackies today. I told you I've been busy in the kitchen. And I was hoping that we could just kind of keep this, here in this house, but nothing's ever sacred. So actually I did put on the Instagram page that we were a little bit sangria. We were a little bit late with recording, and that was because of me. Because as I was making our snackies, a baking pan fell off the top shelf and landed in my face, and mainly in my mouth region. And I still have kind of this who's that? What the hell's that joker's name? One of those socialites that we don't know what the fuck they do. A Kylie Jenner top lip is happening right now.
Oh yeah. I was worried you were going to go to, what's his name? Joaquin Phoenix.
No.
With his little.
No.
I guess that's phase 2.
That's the healing phase.
So you got 619 by a pan, which is awesome, off the top rope.
Booyaka. Damn, that thing hurt. And it was one of my more heavy duty pans, and it's still sitting on the counter, staring at me, and I'm staring back at it because I don't want to have anything to do with it right now. Just don't even look at me.
Yep. So, yeah, Jen was out of commission for a couple of days and a little pitiful. I don't blame her, because not only did it cut the inside of her mouth because she was looking up at the pan as it was jumping at her, lunging at her like a wild animal. It did cut both the outside and the inside of your lip.
This sangria is the shit.
Awesome.
All right. Sorry. But let me get back on the attackies. And what do you think?
Well, yes, it does go well with the chicken.
Delicious again, Peter. All right. So today what we have is a traditional Italian tea cake. The recipe came from Smitten Kitchen and it's credited to pastry chef Jessica Weiss, and a link, of course, is on our Patreon page for it. The Italian tea cake, aka the ciambellone, is a traditional Tuscan cake typically associated with liveliness and friendliness. Much like the sangria, each family has its own ciambellone recipe, something that's unique. And so every mother and every grandmother has her own unmistakable way of preparing this cake, which is typically enjoyed as breakfast or as an afternoon snack. And it's a very simple cake, like many others. It was originally baked only on Holy Thursday. So what we're going to do is tuck into some traditional Italian tea cake while we get to the story.
The only thing I'll add to that is I'm sure those unique tea cakes made by every other grandmother were not quite as unique as the one we'll hear about today.
That would be correct, sir. At least I hope so. All right. So, yeah, actually, we have some nice pictures. Andy did jump in and help me with getting the glaze done on the tea cake when I was out of commission, and well, basically in a state of shock. I've been traumatized. We talked about PTSD last time, guys. This might not be as intense as it is for some people, but I'm pretty fucking ill about this whole thing.
I'm good.
I'm happy for you. Okay, so this time we are covering yet another female serial killer. This one's from Italy, and you may have heard her story before. She's particularly intriguing to me because she, as I see it, was the queen of the DIY project, wasting very little of the remains of her victims. Is your curiosity piqued? I sure as hell hope so. And you know, I'm the geek of all psychology geeks when it comes to this type of stuff. So we'll do a quick review of the information that was presented when we discussed Jane Toppin. And then we'll discuss a bit more after we get to know this sweet little old lady, Leonarda Cianciulli. As you may recall, we noted that there is truly very limited information regarding female related crime, serial murderers, and the forensic profiles behind them. The primary exposure the majority of us have had has been by greater probability in reference to males. Female serial killers are believed to comprise less than 15% of all serial killers. And in general, the literature notes that serial killers of the female gender tend to harbor more very different motives as well as accomplish their goals, more often with less violent means. They operate within relatively close proximity to their homes in comparison to their male counterparts, and they are more likely to have known their victims for a period of time. And recall that Holmes and Holmes in 1998 attempted to classify the female serial killer, developing 5 subtypes based on motives and patterns of offenses. And similar classifications have been established for male serial killers as well. Putting a gender in front of the words serial killer is like a tongue twister. Anyway, these subtypes include the comfort killer, hedonistic, visionary, power seeker, and disciple. Recall the comfort killer, which is the most commonly found subtype, is characterized by having some sort of extrinsic motivation, some sort of secondary gain, is well planned and organized in her acts, and she knows her victims. She selects them according to the expected gain. And this is where Black Widows fall into this category. And they typically have the longest active period. Hedonistic killers, which are far more rare in the female serial killer world, are intrinsically motivated either sexually or sadistically, and their victims are strangers but may be selected based on specific characteristics. She's also well planned and organized in her acts of murder, and the person that we drew the parallel with when we talked about Jane Toppin was Eileen Wuornos. The visionary killer tends to suffer from severe breaks from reality and commit spontaneous violent acts. Her murders are motivated by her psychosis, often being in response to internal stimuli, hallucinations, and or delusions. The power seeker is intrinsically motivated typically by her desire to dominate her victim. Her murders are well planned and organized. She typically opts for victims who are strangers, but they tend to share certain characteristics, such as helplessness. And she may use her offense as a means to boost her self-esteem, and this is where we place Jolly Jane. And then finally, the disciple commits murders under the influence of a charismatic leader, like Leslie Van Houten, who is part of the Charlie Manson family. She is intrinsically motivated by her desire to be accepted by her idol, and her victims are selected by her leader. Her killings are typically well organized and planned. And of course, just like their male counterparts, it's impossible to understand the female serial killer based solely on one theoretical framework. Biological, genetic, social, and psychological factors are at play. And once the information is presented, we'll do our best to apply it to Leonarda. So here it goes, episode 4. This is delicious. You must give me the recipe.
Leonarda Cianciulli was born in Montella, Avellino. I have to look at Jenn. Jenn's family has a lot of Italian roots. So
I think it may actually be Montella. It'd be Montella if it were Spanish.
Yeah, that's
or
true.
Portuguese.
Yeah, I speak Spanish more. I apologize to any Italians out there. Anyway, so Montella, Avellino. And the date of her birth was not consistent across the sources that were consulted, But the consensus is that she was born on April 18th, 1894. She was born to Amelia Dinolfi and was the product of a rape. Amelia, a young woman of high society, was stalked and raped by a much older town drunkard named Mariano Cianciulli. And as she was leaving a well-chaperoned dinner party, Mariano, already a bottle or so of cheap wine in, dragged her into a nearby field and had his way with her. Initially, she thought she was being robbed. Even as he violated her, she really had no idea what was going on. But she did feel shame when she came to her senses, that deep Catholic guilt and shame that's instilled in all of us Catholics. Yep. Bet you even feel guilty just doing that.
Actually, I'm okay now. It took me 40-something years to get over it, but...
Fair enough. Mariano kept an eye on Amelia, wondering if she had the guts to report him to the police. She didn't. And once it was known that Amelia was pregnant, her parents interrogated her as to who the other party was. Mind you, her temperament changed considerably since her night in Mariano's clutches, but her mother was honing in on the physical changes. Amelia was beginning to show, and Amelia gave up Mariano's name eventually, but rather than seeking justice, her parents met around the dinner table with his family to demand that he make an honest woman of her. So the rape was clearly less of an issue per their perspective. What was more important was that the upper echelon did not gossip about Amelia and bring embarrassment to her family. So Amelia and Mariano married. Of course, it was quick and joyless, the ceremony, that is, and the couple moved into a hovel in the poorest part of town. Mariano continued his drunken and unemployed ways, and Amelia was often the target of his anger. If she declined to be intimate with him, he would forcibly take what he wanted. As her pregnancy was progressing, it did not deter his abuses, nor did it encourage him to find a way to meet her basic needs. In all honesty, it's a wonder that the pregnancy went full term, frankly. And when Leonardo was born, she was hardly viewed as her mother's pride and joy. Rather, she represented her mother's loss of youth and, well, of her status. Leonardo's mother was also so young at the time of her birth that she had no idea how to be a proper mother. Sometimes you'll hear it said that the instinct will just kick in, but when you essentially loathe what your child represents, can maternal instincts develop?
So here's this poor kiddo being brought into the world with the deck completely stacked against her. And a child doesn't need to experience direct abuse to know how someone feels about them. Children are incredibly sensitive and incredibly intuitive, and they can pretty well read the feelings others have towards them. And this wasn't any different for Leonarda. Her childhood was miserable, and it was also fraught with abuse. So when her mother could not defend herself against Mariano, the thing that she would do was she would take it out on Leonarda later on. 3 years into Amelia and Mariano's marriage, he didn't return home one night during a typical evening of heavy drinking. And after waiting a few days, because he'd usually show up 2 to 3 days after that night when he was on a binge, she took Leonarda with her as she went looking for him, eventually finding him at the home of one of his friends. He was burning with fever and had fallen into a deep slumber, and nobody could wake him from it. Given how much a doctor would cost, Amelia and Leonarda had Mariano brought home, and they waited for him to die. And during those nights that they waited, Amelia slept the most soundly she had in years. She looked forward to becoming a widow, and once she mourned publicly for a bit, she would begin courting again. And she did, and this time Amelia was able to venture out from under the storm cloud that Mariano cast over her. And surely her family would welcome her and provide her with the emotional and financial support she and her daughter so badly needed. But much to her surprise, they didn't. So she abandoned Leonarda in the evenings to go out for drinks and find a suitor. And she was able to do this in the middle-class social circles, which was a contrast from high society that she was born into, but a massive improvement from the squalid living that she had recently endured with Mariano. And most unfortunately, the interest men had in Amelia was more just about the sex, someone to sow their wild oats with before marrying a respectable woman, or a way to get off from the man he would never marry at all. And eventually Amelia found herself a second husband. He at least had a bit more to offer her financially, but he did waste his money lavishing it on Amelia and providing little but table scraps for Leonarda. And Leonarda was basically left to care for herself, left to drown in an emotional pool of self-loathing and anxiety.
Leonarda attempted to hang herself just before the age of 13. At 13, And unfortunately, in today's day and age, that's not unheard of. But in the early 1900s, how common would that have been? And when the suicide failed, she tried to kill herself a year later. Did her mother care? No, not really. The option for escape that Leonarda had was marriage, but Amelia wanted full control of that area of Leonarda's life, and she wanted her daughter to have every opportunity at a high society marriage from which she could also reap the rewards. So Amelia conducted courtship business, and Leonarda, with no knowledge of courtship conventions, took matters into her own hands and began dating. At the age of 23, Leonarda married a registry clerk named Raphael Pansardi. Her mother did not approve of the marriage, having someone in mind for Leonarda to marry at the time. But despite her mother's plans, Leonarda and Raphael wedded. Leonarda would crave the stability that marriage to Raphael offered, but as she made her choice, Leonarda claimed that her mother cursed her. She had long believed in the supernatural, as was normal for a young woman in this day and age. She truly believed that her mother's words had power and that they were haunting. And Leonarda, who was already anxious of nature, became more anxious. She developed a harsh internal critic that believed she was failing in her marriage as well as in all aspects of her life. And then her health began to fail as well. She began to have seizures, and she may have possibly had epilepsy, but it wasn't diagnosed back then. And she would not go to the doctor as she felt certain this was the result of her mother's curse.
So Leonarda eventually had her palm read by a traveling Romani, and a Romani is another name for somebody from the gypsy culture. And before the reading, she cried out, just barely getting her hand to the palm reader and saying, "Am I going to die? Is that what this curse is going to do?" And as the fortune teller read her palm, she said, "No, you're not going to die, not for a long time." And Leonarda felt such relief that she almost missed the fortune teller saying to her, "You're going to live a long life, full of sadness. You will outlive every one of your children." And the couple, determined to have a normal life and complete family, began trying to conceive despite the fortune teller's words. It took 3 years for Leonarda to become pregnant with their first child. Her anxiety skyrocketed as she was determined to keep the life inside her safe from the curse, and more seizures were triggered, and with that, falls. And she miscarried within 3 months of learning that she was pregnant. And the couple decided to move far from her mother and far from the curse. In 1921, the couple moved to Pansardi's native town of Lauria Potenza. With distance and time, Leonarda became less inclined to believe in her mother's curse, and her anxiety abated. In 1922, the couple welcomed their eldest son, Giuseppe, to the family. He was her miracle child and dwarfed all the other children that survived in his importance to Leonarda. Luck was turning. The only area of concern was finances. She worked a few jobs here and there, mainly tending bar and wiping tables in the local taverns, and the couple decided it was again time to try for another child. And sadly, another miscarriage. During her marriage, Leonarda was pregnant 17 times. She lost 3 of the children due to miscarriage. 10 more of her children died in their youth. And I'm putting my money on Leonarda fully buying into the efficacy of her mother's curse and the stress that came with it. Of course, it's no surprise that she was fiercely protective of her 4 surviving children. But Raphael noticed how Leonarda's smothering ways were unhealthy for her as well as for the children. Eventually, he was able to talk her into taking a job cleaning a bank, and she found it offered stability and gave her a sense of satisfaction. But her pay was meager, and with the death of her 10th child occurring while she was at work, she decided to create a false account in the bank ledgers. The whole idea was that she would have a nest egg on paper that contained what she thought would be sufficient to afford medical care if any of her other children should fall ill.
But in 1927, Cenciulli was sentenced and imprisoned for fraud. She made it abundantly clear to those pressing charges that she had acted alone to ensure her husband did not get slapped with the same sentence as she. She served an 18-month sentence in a Catholic reformatory, while the Pansardi family had to effectively turn their back on Leonarda and Raphael. They did provide them some money, though, to relocate. And they did. They moved to Lacedonia, Avellino, into a small house overlooking the Osento River. The children settled in nicely. Raphael began work in a stable registry clerk position, and Leonarda began to relax a little bit into her mother role. But she became pregnant again and was convinced that she would miscarry this child. And again, she visited a traveling Romani for palm reading. and this was her reading. In one hand, I can see prison. In the other, a mental asylum. In Leonardo's estimation, this was worse than any other reading she could have gotten. Mental asylums were the equivalent to a death sentence, and those who were confined there were held in the most horrible of conditions. The fact that she gave birth to a healthy baby boy confused Leonardo. She continued to give all of her attention to Giuseppe, and her care of the newborn was essentially providing basic care. She was scared, anxious, and her seizures returned with a vengeance. With the return of her seizures, she feared harming the baby. What if she dropped him when a seizure began to take hold of her? She continued to visit fortune tellers. She began to educate herself on fortune telling in hopes of learning how to escape her imagined fate. While she learned how to tell fortunes, she could not find an answer to her anxieties and fears. And then the 1930 Irpina earthquakes hit. Homes were destroyed as families and the townspeople watched from the fields. And the dread set in yet again. The destruction of Lacedonia that occurred on that night, Leonardo believed, was her fault. The death toll was approximately 1,400. Their stability, their security, it was gone. The family, with 4 surviving children, made their way to Correggio. Correggio welcomed the refugees of the earthquake, and Raphael quickly found employment. Leonardo started to relax again, but not without acknowledging the impermanence of life and a comfortable existence. However, she allowed herself to hope and dream. Perhaps the curse had unleashed its final terrors with the earthquake. Bonds of friendship developed, and Leonardo opened a soap shop with Raphael's blessing. Soon, she became a successful businesswoman. Leonardo was able to continue to develop her social bonds, inviting the women of the town to enjoy tea and cakes in the shop as her daughter tended to business. She also began to be consulted for her great wisdom once the women became aware that she had an interest in fortune-telling.
It was kind of neat as I was reading about this, and Leonardo started to become kind of more of a pillar in the community. She became so relaxed in what she was doing that she allowed herself to write poetry. She shared her poetry with the women in the community. They had a great deal of respect for her. And when it did finally get out that she was interested in fortune telling, that was just really neat. And as we talked about before, with her being superstitious, and that was just kind of something that was inherent in the culture at that time. So her fortune telling fit right in. And as time passed, with her soaps becoming quite popular far and wide, Leonardo entertained the traveling Romani that came through the town. She would barter with them, receiving occult books, tarot and oracle cards, and the like. And she actually learned 3 separate forms of Italian folk magic. Strigaria, which is similar to modern Wicca, Benedicaria, and then Straganeria. Leonardo took her studies a step further, and she began to actually practice the crafts. So she wasn't just studying, she now started practicing the spells and the rituals. And in the town, she became known as the fixer. She was the lady that you would go to with your problems, and she would somehow, some way, help you fix those problems. But then in 1939, World War II broke out. And Mussolini started a heavy recruitment of soldiers, and Giuseppe answered the calling. As Leonardo saw marriage as an escape from her mother, Giuseppe viewed joining the military as a way to step out from under the relentless smothering of his mother. And when Leonardo found out, she maintained her composure until she was behind closed doors. When she was behind closed doors, she searched for the ritual that would afford Giuseppe adequate protection. Inside and out, 100%. Of all the different texts that she consulted, they all agreed that protection came from the law of equivalent exchange. That is, to save a life, she would have to take a life. And as much as this sickened her, Leonardo concocted a plan for murder. Her first victim was Faustina Setti. And this woman had such a pathetic existence. And these aren't like, I'm not laughing at her because it's funny. I'm just kind of, this the uncomfortable laughter that comes with knowing that somebody's had it tough. She was often the butt of many of the jokes in Correggio and was just quite the pitiful soul. Multiple marriages had been arranged for her but fell through, and she often sought Leonardo's advice on her situation. And Leonardo truly just came to the conclusion that Faustina was just not meant to be married, but she didn't want her to give up hope. But for her grand plan to make the law of equivalent exchange work for her for protection of her son, she convinced Faustina that a marriage had been arranged for her in what is modern-day Croatia. So a gentleman saw her picture and expressed an interest in her, and so it was a green light. She talked Faustina into writing letters to her friends that Leonarda would post for her, or if Leonarda didn't post them, she'd get her son to do so. Pretty crafty thinking. And these letters did keep Faustina's family from being concerned about her well-being. Well, they were getting letters from her. Things were great, right? And on the day Faustina was supposed to leave to meet her future husband, she arrived at Leonarda's house, bags packed, ready to go. She was nervous, and so Leonarda offered her a glass of wine, even as early as it was in the morning, just to help her calm her nerves. And in this glass of wine, Leonarda had mixed poison, and she passed out. Faustina passed out, and Leonarda struck her repeatedly with an axe. Repeatedly. And the first hit wasn't even a good hit. Leonarda was so nervous that she tried, and it wasn't enough to stop Faustina from begging for her life, and it was a bad scene. But after she was able to kill Faustina, she drained the blood from all of the various limbs that were scattered about her kitchen, and she took all that blood and she put it in a baking pan and she baked it on a low temperature. And then she placed the body parts into a large vat with caustic soda, because her plan was to make soap from Faustina's remains. She broke the coagulated blood into a fine powder and mixed it into tea cake batter. The soap was a total fail. So for Giuseppe to be protected from the inside, by consuming tea cake, and then on the outside by bathing with this soap that was made, both parts of the ritual would need to be successful. And Leonarda dumped that failed soap mush, and she served the tea cake to townspeople in her shop. Didn't think anything about it. And she consulted her references because she needed to try again. This time she needed to make it work.
So, her second victim was Francesca Sovi.
By the way, are you enjoying your tea cake?
I am. It's
wonderful.
very good.
I don't have any mystery ingredients in it, I promise.
No. So,
that was great.
Somebody had to do it. Her second victim, going back to the story, was Francesca Sovi. Leonarda had come to the conclusion that the soap was a failure because she had chosen a person who was fairly advanced in years and whose life was pretty sad and pathetic, frankly. The exchange had not been of equal value. Francesca, however, was a school teacher in the town that retired early to care for her ailing husband. She was younger than Leonarda, and her life had been filled with far more joy than that of Faustina's. Francesca needed to find work. Leonarda was more than happy to offer this help. Like with her first victim, Leonarda used what she knew of her victim, and that she knew what she wanted more than anything, and so she used that to draw her in. She assured Francesca that her clientele of nobility, that she could procure letters of recommendation that would make her a shoo-in for a job at an elite girls' school near Switzerland. Apparently, the fortune-telling business was doing well if she had nobility coming in there, or it was a cover story. I'm not sure which.
Her soap actually was very popular, and she did have the opportunity to rub shoulders with folks who were pretty hoity-toity.
So that was what enabled her to set that alibi in motion with the elite school near Switzerland. She did use the same MO with pre-written postcards and poisoned wine. She also, whenever she was getting started, she swore Francesca to secrecy to make sure that nobody else knew the plan. And so once she had the postcards and the secrecy, Leonarda refined her techniques to eliminate much of her mess whenever she was handling the body parts. And actually, this time she didn't hesitate with her axe. She was much cleaner. She had a little bit of practice. I guess, the first time you would assume that there was some revulsion that was going on because it's a new experience, hopefully one that nobody else or nobody listening ever has. And then, once she had everything taken apart and dismantled, the caustic soda went right to work in her soap vat. The tea cake tasted a bit more like iron this time, which wasn't a positive. But
had a wee bit of a bite to it.
Yeah, but Leonardo was convinced the spell was working. But then the soap failed again. And she became so frustrated and went to quickly remove the soap mush from the stove that she forgot to use pot holders and she burned her palms. The burns on her palms, the blisters, they divided her lifelines into a before and after mark, basically. A mark of, a turning point in her life. So this actually was kind of a metaphor for what was going on with her. It was a true roadmap on her palm. So upon his discovery of her mother's injury, Giuseppe became concerned, mostly about his mother's manic and deranged presentation, while he felt that some of the changes he was seeing were his mother's response to his upcoming departure with the military. He was still very ready to leave, though, as you can imagine, being doted on all the time. He was an adult now, and he still had his mother hovering. So Leonardo realized she was running out of time as well, and soon Giuseppe would be going off to war. So with that, she found her final victim, Virginia Cacioppo. Virginia was a celebrity who had left the opera and was well known in the town. Admittedly, Leonardo felt some jealousy and some resentment towards Virginia, who had what she did not. The two did strike up a friendship after Virginia had visited her shop. They connected on common interest in the arts, and eventually Virginia would consult with Leonardo when she needed advice. Leonardo felt valued, and her own notoriety within the town grew. When Virginia told Leonardo she was planning to leave Correggio, she felt betrayed. She indicated she would help Virginia find some sort of employment, but ultimately she began planning her demise. Virginia's life would be a perfect exchange to afford her son the protection he needed when she slayed Virginia. The tea cake yielded from her blood was the sweetest she had ever tasted. The soap came out perfect, and she would protect Giuseppe on the inside and the outside. Giuseppe returned home to an insistent mother who prepared a bath for him, and she bathed him, and the awkwardness he felt was immeasurable. He was reminded that he would soon have freedom. Giuseppe ate the tea cake after his bath, and for his remaining days in her presence, he did not speak to her, nor make eye contact with her, as you can imagine. But to Leonardo, it was worth it. There was only so long that the letters and postcards written by her victims would quell concerns of their safety. In fact, Virginia's sister-in-law was full of suspicion and took investigations into her own hands, which led her to the home of Leonardo. Eventually, Leonardo confessed to protect any suspicions held that her son may have had some involvement in the disappearance of her victims. After his mother was sent to jail, Giuseppe didn't even say goodbye. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison, followed by a 3-year stint in a mental asylum. In one hand, prison, in the other, the asylum, which was her fear all along.
Yeah, so, wow. I just find her to be incredibly interesting. Incredibly interesting. So, when we take into account what information we do have about female serial killers and the efforts of classification, where would one attempt to place Leonardo? Comfort killer, hedonistic, visionary, power seeker, disciple. My gut puts her in the realm of the visionary. You know, the killer that tends to suffer from severe breaks from reality and commit spontaneous violent acts. Her murders are motivated by her psychosis, or more like her superstitions and magical thinking. Were her superstitions really hallucinations? Were they legitimate delusions? The Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, the 4th edition text revised, defines a delusion as a false belief based on incorrect inference about external reality that is firmly sustained despite what almost everyone else believes and despite what constitutes incontrovertible and obvious proof or evidence to the contrary. The belief is not one ordinarily accepted by other members of the people or the person's culture or subculture. That is, it's not an article of religious faith. When a false belief involves a value judgment, it is regarded as a delusion only when the judgment is so extreme as to defy credibility. And like we said before, Leonardo came from a culture that had a pretty good bit of superstition woven into it. Just putting that out there. And so the DSM-5 defines a delusion as fixed beliefs that are not amenable to change in light of conflicting evidence. Their content may include a variety of themes, such as themes of persecution, referential, which is one of those things where when folks are listening to the radio or watching TV and they believe there's certain messages that are just in there for them. Somatic, religious, grandiose, The delusions are deemed bizarre if they are clearly implausible and not understandable to same culture peers and do not derive from ordinary life experiences. The distinction between a delusion and a strongly held idea is sometimes difficult to make and depends in part on the degree of conviction with which the belief is held, despite clear or reasonable contradictory evidence regarding its veracity. So, as far as Leonardo Cianciulli goes, we'll let you decide, but Andy, I'm curious what your take is on this.
Yeah, no, I would say that she definitely had some delusions going there. The fact that she thought that, I'm as open-minded as the next guy, but the fact that she thought that killing somebody and putting their blood in a cake and in soap.
I mean, that may be a spring smidge over the top.
I think it may be a little bit more than that, but yeah.
Just a spring smidge.
Yeah. That being said, culturally, Leonardo lived in a country that has been rich with superstitions for good or evil that still persist even today. The Tuscan Traveler posted an article in 2014 to assist those traveling to Italy in understanding current superstitions such that faux pas were not made during their visits.
I can only imagine what superstitions there are now that the Rona has happened. Just saying.
Yeah, no, I'm right there with you. That being said, here are some of the ones that were listed in 2014.
Hit it.
So, the evil eye, Malocchio. The evil eye is one of the most ancient superstitions in Italy. You guys can't see it, but I'm holding my hands like devil horns and pointing.
My Irish dad would give people the evil eye.
It's nice.
Yeah, usually I actually would get, like you said, with the devil's horn. I took the devil's horn out of this, but yeah, they go together.
They do. So every region seems to have their own version of the evil eye, but some take it more seriously than others. And one thing they seem to have in common is that the evil eye is caused by jealousy and envy. I don't think your dad's was. Your dad's was usually caused by joking around with a glass of wine. But that being said, one test for Malocchio is done by dropping olive oil on a plate of water. If the oil forms in one large drop in the middle of the plate, it's a sure sign of the evil eye.
Dun, dun, dun.
But after chanting the right prayers, usually only women are allowed to know.
Mecca lecca hi, mecca heiny ho.
That was Chambi, and Chambi was a male. I'm not sure how he identified, but he was definitely a male.
Learned it from his mom.
He was a head, so if you're just a head... Anyway, not moving any further down that rabbit hole, we'll move on. The oil, once the women are chanting the chant that they are only allowed to know, the oil may break up into tiny droplets and spread out, thus breaking the curse of the evil eye.
Roses, daisies, happy little bunny rabbits frolicking. Okay.
Lucky numbers.
Look, I got hit in the head by a pan earlier on, so I'm just letting it work itself out.
On to lucky numbers.
Okay.
The number 13 is lucky in Italy. Especially when gambling, the number 13 is also associated with the goddess of fertility and the lunar cycles. It is thought that the number brings prosperity and abundant life. Although 13 is considered lucky, sitting down to a table with 12 others is an ill omen.
Oh, I get it. Go for it. I know why.
At the Last Supper, ate with his 12 disciples before one of them.
Like the kid in the front of the classroom, like, ooh, you got call on me.
Threw me off my game.
Sorry.
Okay, going back to the beginning. At the Last Supper, Jesus ate with his 12 disciples before one of them, Judas Iscariot,
Dun, dun, dun.
betrayed him. Italians aim to avoid
Bastard.
a similar turning of the tables. In modern times, it seems Friday the 13th is starting to lose its charm in Italy, as with the rest of the world.
I mean, you could really only take those movies so far. Oh, wait. Okay.
No, they're still going.
They should. There's a point where you just stop.
But going back to Judas, at the end, it's one of those questions of fate versus destiny.
Okay.
Because he had a role to play that basically God had designed for him.
If this involves like
Just saying.
close reading of the Bible, I am not your girl for that.
No, I'm not saying that. But all I'm saying is that if Judas didn't exist, he wouldn't have been born and rose again. I guess maybe he could have. Somebody else would have done it. But I think he had a role to play. Anyway, moving on. There are superstitions pertaining to bread.
Yay, bread.
Bread is awesome. But it is awesome, but you must never place a loaf of bread face down.
Or you're fucked.
Yep. Bread must always be placed face up or else bad luck will come. Again, Some claim this has its basis in Christianity with the symbol of Christ as the bread of life. It is impolite to turn the bread upside down or to stick a knife in a loaf of bread. Bread is considered a staple of life, and so every precaution is taken in order to prevent cursing the supply.
Those bastards at the Outback Steakhouse stab the bread before they bring it to the
Every
table.
chance they get.
Shitheads. Okay.
It's not uncommon in the restaurant industry.
Well, fine. I mean, if you're going to do that, at least give me some decent service.
And maybe that's what started COVID. Maybe the thing that shut most of the restaurants around town was started by stabbing bread loaves.
Some food, bread, olive oil.
Yep.
Balsamic vinegar for thought. Right
A little
there.
reach on that one, but
Truly is. Alrighty. So, other superstitions: blessing or exorcising a new house. Exorcising. The blessing or exorcism of a new house in Italy is still practiced, especially when it comes to newlyweds. Moving into a first home was accompanied by the necessary rituals to aid the place of any spirits that may have been left by the previous owners or that could harm the new couple or their first child. A new broom is a common first gift to sweep away evil spirits. Sprinkled salt in the corners of the house will purify it. Neighborhood priests go house to house before Easter to bless each home with holy water. And in modern times, a tiny note is frequently wedged in the door to notify the residents of the service. It's not like the time I had, a watchtower from the Jehovah's Witnesses shoved in our door because I was refusing to answer the door.
Yep.
Anyway. All right. The witch doctor, the mago, or the majo, or maga, not MAGA, make America great again, but it's spelled the same way. Southern Italians, Sardinians, and Sicilians, very animated people. Mostly the older generations still mix folk medicine and ancient superstitions. When home remedies did not work and modern medicine was not an option because either the money wasn't there or there was a language barrier. Some neighborhoods have the service of a man or woman trained in ancient practices, bordering on witchcraft. Interesting. Older Sicilians can recall ancient rites involving making dolls to curse an enemy. Oh, yeah. Amulets to protect themselves from evil, or, on the more positive side, love potions to encourage a slow suitor. And all of this is still alive and well in modern-day witchcraft. And spills of all kinds. Don't spill salt or olive oil for fear of bad luck. This conception may have begun as a trick to motivate people to handle the previously expensive goods with care. If it happens, however, toss a bit of salt over each shoulder or rub a drop of oil behind each ear. Now, if you spill wine at the dinner table, wet your fingers and dab some behind every person's ear. And I think my mother-in-law would not like me to do that no matter how many glasses of wine I've spilled at family holiday events.
I don't think your mom would have liked that either.
No. However, I love your parents, and if I should happen to spill some wine, I'll take care of things tomorrow at Thanksgiving dinner.
Oh, it's wine. It's not you just licked your finger.
No. It says wet your fingers. Oh, with wine. I'm sorry.
Yep.
Okay.
Which I find those ones interesting because the concept may have begun as a trick to motivate people to handle expensive goods with care.
Right.
So the rule of thumb is either handle it with care or waste a lot of it.
Yeah.
It's basically
that, or just don't touch that shit, man. I'm just thinking like putting wine behind everybody's ear at the table is guaranteeing a DUI on the way home from the holiday meal.
For someone.
Excuse me, but you smell a lot like alcohol.
So.
Sorry, go ahead.
No.
This sangria is so easy going down.
So, some words to the wise. Never trim toe or fingernails on a Thursday. Don't start a journey, a new project, or get married on a Friday or a Tuesday. What day did we get married on? It was a
Saturday.
Yeah,
like a traditional Saturday.
Yeah, okay. So we're good there. Never have your hair cut during the new moon. This is actually a fairly well-known Wiccan belief as well. And never get a perm during your menstrual cycle, or as Jenn believes, never get a perm at all.
For real, folks. For real.
Some good omens. Seeing a spider at night is a sure sign of monetary income unless you kill it. So if you're scared of them, just live and let live, as the Beatles like to say.
I think that's what screwed us up all these years.
Because if you kill it, then money gets taken away.
Ew.
When you drop something, then someone is thinking of you, and their name starts with the first letter of the item dropped. So if you drop a pen, then possibly Pamela is thinking of you.
Possibly Pam.
Practice your alliteration somewhere else.
Sangria.
Yes.
Is born.
But when your nose itches, it's either pugni or baci.
Baci.
Baci. Yes, that's true. Kissing balls. Baci ball. It's great.
Kiss your balls. Baci those balls.
No, the game.
That sounds like a game too.
That's true, depending on how you look at it.
Baci.
So it's either, and basically pugni or baci is punches or kisses. And then another thing would be dreaming of someone dying, and you will have added 10 years to their life.
I don't want to live that long. I just don't.
So
sorry.
I'm going to let Jen read the next one because there's a moon incantation that she likes. So
I do.
Yep. So take it away, Jen.
I do my best to follow the moon cycles. And so when a new moon appears, the minute you see it, you say the new moon incantation, Benvenuta luna che mi porti fortuna, which means welcome moon and may you bring me good fortune. And this is to be repeated, bowing respectfully at the lunar sliver 13 times with a coin in each hand. I don't know if it will negate the killing of the spiders, though.
Probably not. Now, stepping over to the other side of the scales towards bad omens, Jen?
Oh, yes. Okay, so breaking a mirror will result in 7 years of bad luck. I think that's something that's pretty commonly held across cultures.
At least everybody's heard it at least once.
Yes, so giving a handkerchief as a gift will bring tears. Okay. Passing each other the salt hand to hand without putting it down on the table will lead to an imminent fight between the two. Going back to the previous thing, was that because if you passed it hand to hand, you were more likely to spill it? Possibly.
Maybe.
But I'll be sure tomorrow at the Thanksgiving meal to put it down on the table.
Just touch it down to the table.
Just go. Here you go. All right. Nuns crossing your path. Bad omens. Maybe, because I know when my Nana and my mom would, we'd see nuns, they'd always tell me to touch a button for good luck.
Yeah. Depending on the nun, I know both mom and dad from their school days, not so into nuns. Nuns and three-sided rulers.
I've heard those stories.
Bad
too.
for knuckles.
Bad day for a knuckle.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Crossing arms when shaking hands in a group. So like when y'all are kind of ducking, dodging, and diving, playing the dodgeball.
Whenever you meet up with a bunch of people and it's a little unruly.
Yeah, it's a little crazy. And then an owl sighting is a vision of the spirits of the dead. Now, I'm a little stitious. And so I do know that like whenever I think of my dad, I usually see a cardinal come by. And then monarch butterflies would like not swarm me, but they would come and land on me like shortly after he died. Huh. So anyway, so thoughts, Andy?
Well, I do have one. So depending on how you look at giving a handkerchief as a gift will bring tears. If you have watched the movie The Intern, or if you're
such a good movie.
If you carry around handkerchiefs on a regular basis. In the movie The Intern, he referred to the handkerchief as the last vestige of chivalry, because you always had a handkerchief, not for you, but to hand out to someone that's crying. So ultimately, from that perspective, that's the only reason you have it, is so that you can give it to somebody who's crying. So it's really preparing you for that next time somebody cries. So that could actually be a good omen in a way.
I could see that.
Unless it's going to bring tears to you, in which case that's a problem. But in that version, in the Intern version, it's only given to somebody who's already crying. So I guess tears are already happening to an extent.
I mean, I got a handkerchief as a gift. It was, my Nana gave it to my mom on her wedding day. It was beautifully monogrammed, and then my mom gave it to me for my wedding day, and I ended up wrapping it around my bouquet, but there were happy tears, so it doesn't even necessarily mean that it's bad tears, like tears of some sort of negative something. I sniffled and snorfled and snotted.
I'm sniffling and snorkeling and snotting right now.
At the memory of that beautiful day. No, okay.
It's,
damn it.
At the memory of the summer that left now with the changes in temps.
Oh, yes. Yes, yes.
So with that, I guess, did you have anything else you wanted to add about Bad Omens, Good Omens, any omens at all?
The Omen was a really good movie. Do you know, I told you this. So my brother and I are adopted, but my mom had seen the movie The Omen, and that point where they reveal like the 666 on Damien's scalp. So
Yeah.
when my mother and father like first met my brother and me, we were tiny, like infants, but she checked both of our scalps thoroughly for 3/6s, and they weren't on mine, but I just don't think she saw them well enough on the other. Anyway.
No, I'm with you on that. It was a good movie. I'm not sure where to go from there, but
I really don't have anything else.
I am going to step on to shout outs.
Whoop, whoop.
I'm going to read a few, then you can read a few.
Everyone's a winner.
It is. It's a great song, too. Our kiddo, who is both our creative consultant and our cover art creator, who came through here like a whirling dervish.
I hate this song, but she did come in like a wrecking ball.
She did. You probably heard her there for a few seconds. We love her greatly. She is an only child. She gets bored easily.
I will say, though, today she is off from school in preparation for the holiday, and she helped make the sangria today.
She did?
So she did a lot of stirring, and I believe it really made it
She did not
that it is.
try the sangria.
Oh, no. No, she came in, she smelled it. She's like, I just don't even know. She's like, why is there vinegar in there?
Yeah.
And I was like, yes, it's awful. Don't drink that.
Additionally, a shout out to the Gilsonen Foundation. Why? Because we love them.
We do.
There is one thing that I do want to call out, and I haven't looked at my Instagram. Maybe he's ducking it now. But I swear I saw an Irish whiskey with a round ball of ice in it, which is sacrilege. So,
you think he's ducking, dodging, and diving a wrench?
I think he is. So, Mr. Gilsonen, if that is the case, it's okay. I forgive you. That's only allowed for non-Irish whiskeys, though.
I'm going to get a message after this hits the air.
Probably will. I have some editing to do.
Yeah.
But I'm not going to take too long on it. Additionally, Last of the Real podcast.
Last of the Real podcast.
Make sure
we
you
love
give
you guys.
Yep. We did really have a lot of fun talking to you guys, and make sure you all give it a listen, like, and make some comments. Additionally, don't hesitate to subscribe and support them as well. Jen, take it away.
All right. Yeah, seriously, go ahead and check those guys out on YouTube. They're absolutely amazing. And so dedicated to having a successful podcast. So please help them and just giving your support so that they can grow their success. All right, next we have Kristen Harris and Yeet Trivia. You can find them on Facebook and Instagram. Yeet Trivia hosts many types of virtual games like Wrong Answers Only, World's Hardest Trivia, and there are also topic-specific games. December kicks off with the Good Place Trivia, and the date eludes me. I will say, as we're getting ready to put this one out there for the masses, that tonight is Schitt's Creek Trivia, so your girl's going back into that hoping that she can pick up another prize, just saying. Other shows and movies that make appearances: The Office, Friends, Parks and Rec, Harry Potter. Each month, Mental Crack will be sponsoring at least one game. We'll keep you up to date on our socials, and then the tickets for all games are available via Eventbrite. So go on, get to it. They've got a really good presence, so you'll be able to find them easily on the socials.
Yeah, and for the games that we sponsor, if you like Funkos like we like Funkos,
We love Funkos.
go play the game.
Can you tell them about the really cool Funko? It's like our little best friend's charm.
Yeah, so Jen did buy us Best Friends charms, and I am going to make chains to hang them off of. But it's the Kid and Play Funko Pops.
With their Two Hype t-shirts on.
With their
and
Two
when you
Hype
put them
t-shirts.
together, they're doing the Kid and Play kick step.
And you are?
I'm Kid.
I'm Play.
I'm rocking the high top fade.
Yep.
Thank you.
And yeah, so that being said, do attend Yeet Trivia. Enjoy Yeet Trivia. It's a lot of fun. I, as I've said before, am horrible at wrong answers trivia because only the wrong answers and the most wrongest of answers get points.
Yes.
My mind doesn't work that way. I try to answer things correctly to prove how smart I really am.
I'm going to go ahead and put a shout out there to my coworker, Anthony, who is like the last couple times he's played, he's won, which other coworkers have played. They worry that means that there's a lot of screws loose in his head. So, if you're just not right in the head, it's a great thing for you to play.
Yep.
All right. Our producer is Andy Meyer, the Great, the Magnificent, the Wonderful. And Mental Crack is available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Breaker, Pocket Casts, and Radio Public via Anchor by Spotify. And our plan is to eventually expand to YouTube. Some weeks it just seems like it's more of a priority than others, and this has been a crazy last couple weeks. You can, yes, Andy?
I'm just resting my chin.
Right on the mic. You can email us at mentalcrack, that's mentalcraic @gmail.com. Contact us on Instagram. We are at mentalcrack. And on Facebook, we are Mental Crack, the podcast. Visit our Patreon page for access to sources consultant the preparation of this case. Also consider becoming a patron of the show, like Rob and Fiona. Aussie. And Andy, if you don't have anything else, man, we're closing it out.
Yeah, the only thing I'm going to say is this is the Thanksgiving episode, so thank you for joining us before Turkey Day. For those of you that celebrate, for those of you that don't celebrate, that shouldn't stop you from having a Turkey Day of your very own.
You just go along for the ride or something.
But the rest of us are getting 4 days off. I'm sure you guys have your own holidays that we don't celebrate that I am just not aware of. So enjoy those instead.
Yes.
But have some turkey. Cranberry sauce I could take or leave, but stuffing or dressing, as some people call it, I'm all about it. That being said, everybody, thank you for listening, and until next time,
Slancha, bitches.